Hello, everyone. My name is Steve Dubin. I'm your host for the My Generation podcast, which is sponsored by South Shore Senior News. South Shore Senior News is a monthly magazine, a website, also has an online presence on Facebook in particular. And the mission is to provide useful, entertaining information for seniors, their caregivers, and those who provide services to seniors. Today, we have as a guest Dr. Carol Perlman, who has over 20 years of helping folks with cognitive behavioral therapy. She's a licensed psychologist and has a private practice, is based on the South Shore. A large part of her practice is time management and how that helps people both who are in the workplace and outside of the workplace. And I think you'll find this discussion to be really interesting of how to make better use of your time so that you're both more productive and happier. Welcome aboard, Carol.
Thank you so much for having me, Steve. Thank you for the introduction.
Our pleasure. Thank you for joining us. So let me jump in. So today's discussion in particular is looking at folks who provide care for family members who may get occasionally overwhelmed and or those who have recently retired and are having some transitional problems determining what to do with their time. And so let's take each of those separately. Let's talk first about caregivers and the challenge of managing that time, that stress, and that important contribution to a family.
Yeah, I think your listeners will probably fall into either of those categories and maybe somewhere in between. But the good news is that everything I'm going to talk about today is going to be relevant across the board, no matter where you fall in those categories. So yeah, being a caregiver, whether it's for aging parents, aging family members, or even for children, adult children, younger children, it can be a very challenging phase of life. A lot of people talk about the sandwich generation, where you're still caring for your own children, but also have responsibilities for caring for aging relatives. And it can feel all encompassing. It can feel exhausting. It can feel anxiety provoking. It can feel discouraging. It can feel there are just a lot of challenges that go along with that. And while we can't necessarily change or improve all of them, I do believe that by becoming more intentional about how you use your time, you actually can make a dent in the severity of the challenge and make life feel better day in and day out.
Okay, and so can you give us some specifics of how to tackle that?
Yeah. So the first place that my mind goes is thinking about, whether your life is still divided into weekends and work weeks or not. I think we still feel that there's a transition from Sunday night to Monday night going into the week. So the first question I invite people to think about is, what are you doing to help support that transition? Do you just slide into Monday morning and, regret a little bit that the weekend's over? And I know a lot of people have a great sense of dread that they're going into the week and there aren't as many enjoyable activities coming up. And so the first thing I encourage people to look at is whether you sit down. I like to do it on Sunday. I usually recommend that people do it on Sunday, but you can do it whenever you want. Sit down and make a plan. Take out the calendar. First of all, I hope you're using some sort of planning system. Then you're not trying to keep everything in your head, because that does not work. Take out your planning system, whether it's digital, whether it's paper, and just get the lay of the land. Take a look at what's coming up. Think about, is there anything I need to do to be ready, whether it's doctor's appointments, other kinds of appointments. Maybe you need to add some items to your to-do list earlier in the week so that you're ready by the time those appointments come up. And check for mistakes. We all do it. Sometimes we double book. Sometimes we realize we didn't allow for enough travel time and we have to make some adjustments. So if you sit down in advance and look at it, you're going to have a chance to set yourself up for success and experience each day with much greater ease, greater productivity, and greater mood and well-being.
Okay, and then just from a real concrete micro level, um, what do you recommend for a calendar system? Especially, well, for both those who are tech savvy and those who are not.
Yeah, everybody is different. So I wish I could say that there was one magical system that would do all the work for you and immediately change your life. And unfortunately, I can't. We are all different. Some of us process information better digitally. Some of us process information better on paper. There are pros and cons to both. So I encourage you to do an experiment and test out each and figure out what works for you. A lot of people, myself included, use a hybrid, what I call a hybrid version. You know, the calendars we have in our phones are so beneficial. Most of us have our phones with us at all times. So it really does make sense to put all critical dates and times into a phone. But you may not process information and be able to see it visually like myself. So I do like to transfer the information over and use a paper calendar to handle what I call the white space. And this is where all of the important transformation is happening. It's the white space that's not marked up with a scheduled appointment. And that's where you have the opportunity and the challenge of having to make decisions. And depending on how you use that white space, it's really going to have a big difference on how you experience your day.
Okay, yeah, and just a side note, I find calendars work best when you actually check them in the morning first.
Well, yes, there's that. Yes,
Yeah,
you have to check
right.
it. It's one thing to have it set up, but you
Yes.
have to check it and even multiple times during the day to really make sure you are staying on top of it and not missing anything.
Okay, great. Thank you. So let's go to you talk about three important self-care activities and scheduling them in your outline to me and prior to this. Can
Yeah.
you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that's part two of the tactic. So part one is to create that habit of sitting down at the beginning of the week or whenever it is and actually looking at your calendar, making sure it's set up. And the other benefit of doing this is that you then have the opportunity to ask yourself a question. You can take a look at the week, you can see it laid out and say, how do I feel about this week? Do I have everything accounted for? Does this week reflect my values? So, for example, if you are someone who really values being healthy and taking care of your health, when you look at your calendar, do you see all the activities that are going to get you to that goal? Do you see blocks of time to exercise? Do you see blocks of time to stop and have meals, to actually stop in the middle of the day and have lunch? Do you see time to make dinner before you're actually starving and then you're raiding the fridge and eating whatever you can get your hands on, or you're getting restaurant food because it's too late to cook? So, do you value meditation and creating time to slow down and pause and breathe and just sort of settle your emotions that are building up? All of that, you should see all of that in your calendar. If that's what's important to you, you should see that. If you value spending time with loved ones, whether it's the family that you live with or family members around you, do you see time in your calendar scheduled to go see them or call them or do some sort of activity with them? So that's why I love doing this step in advance, because you have the chance to take a look. And if you don't see it, you can make that conscious effort to make changes and say, wow, I don't have any self-care time allocated here. Something needs to go. And that's when you can start taking things out. Maybe you rearrange meetings and suggest that you meet the following week. We also have the opportunity to take things out. As much as we want to make sure we're putting things in, sometimes we need to take things out if it's just too much in one day. You have the opportunity to see that and say, I'm going to need some more quiet. I need to take a few things out.
Okay. And then you also in your materials talk about unstructured time.
Yes, that's important too. You know, here we're in the Northeast. We're very much in a go, go, go environment. We like a fast-paced life. And yes, you know, maybe we benefit from that. We're productive, we're doing a lot, and that can all nurture our soul and create happiness. But it's also important to allow for some unstructured time. And there are two reasons for that. Number one is that without doubt, your day is not going to execute. It's not going to play out exactly how you thought that it would. So even if you do the greatest job of setting it up in advance, unexpected things will come up and you will have to make some changes. So it's really important, number one, that we embrace that rather than getting rattled and saying, oh my gosh, my day is ruined because now I can't do exactly what I set out to do. Embrace that and just know that you can recover from that. You can very easily pause and regroup and say, okay, I thought I was doing this activity now, but instead I'm going to take this relative to the doctor's appointment. Where am I going to reschedule that activity that I had planned? And you can move it around. So the other benefit, so back to having unstructured time, is that it gives us some more flexibility so that if things come up that we didn't plan on, we have white space in our day and we can move things around. Maybe I thought I was going to go for a walk in the morning, but then it was raining and I couldn't, but the sun's going to come out in the afternoon. And so I can move things around and move that walk into later in the day and get something else done in that time in the morning.
And so,
Oh,
okay.
sorry. I'll say one more quick thing about that.
Yes,
So not only the unstructured space helps us strategize and sort of be available for unexpected events, but also it is okay. We don't have to be doing all the time. And it is not only is it okay, I'm hereby giving you permission, but it's actually really important to let our brain go and not feel like we have to do anything, and then just use that time however you want. If you want to watch TV, if you want to read a book, if you want to knit, if you want to sit outside on your deck and listen to the birds, that's important to do. Just do it with intention and know, okay, I have this time block from maybe 9 to 11 where I'm going to enjoy whatever my heart desires. But at 11, I'm going to start some productivity blocks and I'm going to be productive from 11 to 1 so that at the end of the day, I can go to bed feeling good that I accomplished what I set out to accomplish, but I also took care of myself and I nurtured myself and my soul.
Okay. And so these are all great suggestions. How long, ironically, in a time management world, how much, at what point or how much time does it take to develop these positive habits and have them sort of take hold?
Great question. So, they, quote unquote, they say that it takes 21 days to create a habit. And I've actually looked up the research on that. And it does vary, even though we hear that quote a lot. It does vary because it depends on the habit. If you're trying to work on something like make your bed every day, I'm going to venture to say that you could probably learn that habit within 21 days. If you're trying to create the habit of running 4 miles a day, well, that probably is going to take more than 21 days. So it does depend on the habit, but I still work within that parameter of 21 days. I run all of my courses on 21 days, on a 21-day basis, because I do think there is something to be said for that time frame. It's long enough to get some momentum, especially if you're working side by side with someone. It's a good amount of time to work side by side, get some momentum. You might not be perfect, but you probably have enough momentum at that point where you can then take it the rest of the way on your own, or with some key accountability strategies put into place to help you get the rest of the way of solidifying your habit.
Okay. And then as you work with people, how does that process go? Do you tend to give them an online workbook? Is it one-on-one? How do you interact with your clients to help them better schedule their time?
Yeah, I can do either. So in my career, I've done a lot of one-on-one work. I've been a psychologist throughout my career, so I can work with people one-on-one. And for a lot of people, that's really effective because you can really go deep into their individual circumstances and help them create a plan that works for them. But these days, people are really craving community. And 4 years ago, when I started branching out from clinical work, in the hospital setting and in my own private practice, and really trying to help the general population who is all struggling with time management, I realized, and of course, this was also in the middle of COVID, but people are really craving community. And so I changed the way that I was delivering my materials and created online workshops where people work in the community. They have, like I was saying, for 21 days, they have a lot of interaction with me. So they're learning from me. They have the coaching and accountability from me, but they also have the opportunity to learn with and from each other. And I have to say, I've been really surprised at how powerful that element was of being able to see, number one, the validation. You're not the only person struggling with this. And you just can't imagine sort of that aha moment when people hear someone else saying the same words that they have in their own head. I'm such a failure. I just can't keep my house clean. And to have someone else validate that is really, really powerful. So that's been really significant. And then also, we are all really good problem solvers. And so we have all figured out, even if you feel like you're struggling in some ways, you have all figured out how to do other things. And there's an opportunity to be a teacher while you're also a student. And that give and take is really powerful. So my preferred method now is to run private groups where people can work together, because then we layer on so many strategies for learning like that.
Okay. And so that's great. It's nice to know that there are various options, and there's some direct contact and supervision. Let me go back to the topic of sort of the transition of retiring, even
Yeah.
retiring without the additional challenge of taking care of somebody else. How do you make those transitions? Some people struggle with either a retirement that's empty, that they didn't really think of what they wanted to do, or they overscheduled to sort of fill in that void.
Yeah. Yeah. Steve, we could do a whole separate podcast on this. I really have come to see that the transition to retirement can be really complicated, even though it's something that we all say we're living for, we're excited for. It's been really surprising to me to talk to people who are approaching retirement, and I ask them, so have you ever thought about what your retirement would look like? And they give me this kind of blank look. No, I've been an accountant all my life. I've been a teacher all my life. I've never even imagined what I would be without that. And so that's one of the things I really recommend, is starting to do some of this planning in advance and putting some things in place before you actually get to true retirement, because it feels really different. If you have been in a career, if you've been a caretaker, and all of a sudden that changes, it's really can be quite shocking. So I like to encourage people to plan that in advance. And, it's a great opportunity to tap into the things that you love, the hobbies, the activities that maybe you haven't done in so many years, but you used to really enjoy when you were younger. And this is a chance to bring them back. And so you can start, even if you're still working and retirement is coming up, you can start to put some of these back into place, so that you already have that habit, the community, the routine all set up by the time you get to retirement. And then the other thing I'll say about that is, just from a scheduling standpoint, what a shock it can be to go from a life where you had lots of meetings and lots of events scheduled, and then you wake up and it's a glorious thing. I don't have to be anywhere, but it can also be really overwhelming. And I know a lot of people get stuck to just kind of in that inertia in the morning of, I don't know what to do first. There's endless possibilities, but yet that feels overwhelming. So that's where I go back to my recommendations for setting the week up in advance, so that you're not having to make all those decisions hour by hour, and you had a plan already set in place where you thought about it before you actually had to do it, but you were just able to think about the strategy. You kind of separate out the decision making from the doing, and then it makes each of those a lot more effective.
And so you think 21 days, people will get used to the idea of retirement?
I'm not saying that that's one they would completely get used to, but I think we could put a lot in place to create a plan and to get some momentum. And then I would really be thinking about, if I was working with someone, for those 21 days, we would maximize our time together, but I would also be working on putting things in place for when our work is done, so that they have support, community, accountability, ongoing coaching, whatever they need, even if it's not going to be the daily 21 days anymore.
Okay, great. Well, that sort of brings us to the end of our time. What I'd really like to do is make sure people know how to get a hold of you, so that they could pursue whatever additional relationship and contact they'd like to have. What's the best way to reach you?
I have several websites, but I'll give you two to make it easier. So one is carolperlman.com. That's very easy. That's my professional website. And then I have a habit coaching business, Healthy for Life, the number 4, Healthy for Life, by carolperlman.com. And you'll have links to everything. I have a podcast. You can also find me there, Healthy Habits for Life. You can find me wherever you listen to podcasts. And I share lots of tips and strategies related to our conversation today.
Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you on. You're right. We're going to have you on again. Thank you for your time and your insight.
Thank you so much for having me today.
All right. Take care.